समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
As I'm recording this episode of Cut the Clutter, this is almost exactly a year to the hour. Almost exactly a year to the hour from when Indian Air Force sat locked and loaded with targets already fed into their computers, and also the Army, Indian Army, but we always use the Army with a capital A for the Indian Army. The Army also ready across the LOC with the list of targets across the LOC and into Pakistani Punjab with its long range artillery and also loitering munitions. These targets the Army and the Air Force had known for a very long time. These were predetermined targets, and the idea was, because the presumption was that one day provocation will come with a big terror attack, and this time these targets will be hit without crossing into Pakistan's airspace or into Pakistan's land boundary. The post-Uri strikes, as we know, were across the LOC, so Indian soldiers had gone across into Pakistani territory. Post-Pulwama, the raid on Balakot took place when the Mirages went quite deep inside Pakistani mainland. This time the idea was to do everything that you want to do from within Indian territory with predetermined targets. So this is the time when everything was locked and loaded and then was being delivered in the intervening night of May 6 and May 7. A little around 2 a.m., give or take a few minutes. I was still awake, but I got messages from my office with some videos that were coming out of Pakistan from Bahawalpur first, showing the missiles hitting the Jaish-e-Mohammed headquarters, and then they came from Muridke as well. Army released the pictures the next day. So all of this came out, and the Pakistani statements, etc., etc. 1 year, an anniversary is a time when people will observe it, some will celebrate it, some will make claims, some claims will be exaggerated, particularly on the Pakistani side. An anniversary is an occasion for both sides to talk up their own stories. I'm sure the Pakistanis also are making claims. That is, however, not what we are talking about. Non-serious people make claims, have celebrations, have anniversaries in commemoration. Serious people reflect on the lessons of a conflict, particularly when you know that conflict was just one more chapter in the ongoing India-Pakistan situation, and the next one will always be around the corner. This conflict did not settle anything. The 1971 war was decisive. It had the Pakistanis surrender. In the east, 93,000 prisoners were taken, and Pakistan was broken into two. A new republic came into being. Even then, that did not bring everlasting peace. That also brought peace for about, I'd say, 14, 15 years. By 1984-85, with trouble rising in Punjab, Pakistanis were again ready. By 1989, they had added Kashmir to Punjab, and since then we've been dealing with that situation. The crisis with Pakistan, the warlike situation with Pakistan is not going to go away, and whatever happened at Op Sindoor, this was not a long-term deterrent. What Op Sindoor did was to tell the Pakistanis that, look, now there is a new normal. If you do something major in India, there will be a reprisal or there will be a payback delivered to you in Pakistani territory. Then you deal with the consequences. That principle was established with Op Sindoor. It was established partly post Pulwama, but Op Sindoor was more decisive. That said, if we presume that another crisis is around the corner, I'm not being alarmist, I'm not saying it will happen tomorrow or in 6 weeks or 6 months or 1 year or 2 years, but at some point it will. In a national interest, I had said earlier that since we became independent, we've averaged a big national security crisis with foreign threats at the rate of about one every 7 years. And in the last 60 years, it's about one every 5 years. So we have to be prepared all the time. And that's why it's important to look at the military lessons of Op Sindoor. I had written a national interest earlier on the anniversary of Pahalgam massacre about the larger diplomatic, political, strategic lessons of Op Sindoor or of Pahalgam followed by Op Sindoor. Now we are looking at purely military lessons. You can call them tactical, but what is tactical in an 88-hour battle is also strategic in something that goes on for 3, 4 or 5 days. It can also be strategic because ultimately India's idea is to bring about deterrence. India's idea is not to fight a full-fledged war with Pakistan. In fact, India will be quite happy if the Pakistanis leave us alone and focus on whatever newfound glory they see in the Middle East, protect Saudi Arabia, or fight the Afghans if they get bored, or flatter the Americans. India will be quite happy if Pakistan looks westwards, but they will not, because for Pakistan army to justify its preeminence in power, it has to keep on creating trouble with India. That's the reason trouble being around the corner is a very generic statement. It can be in any time period. India always has to remain prepared. That's why the larger military lessons of Op Sindoor have to be listed and revised. I will list some for you. This is by no means definitive or exhaustive. You will also see an article and a video from our defense editor Snehesh Alex Philip, who's talked about many of these aspects. I will share those links also with you. I will list a few for you. Number one, Op Sindoor taught us that warfare with Pakistan has changed fundamentally. So there was a time when we looked at strike corps. General Sundarji redefined warfare with Pakistan, or the idea of warfare with Pakistan, with exercise brass tacks in 1986-87. He said that for too many decades, the idea was that big bodies of armor will go from one side to the other, then they will be stopped at the first ditch cum band or canal on the other side, and then they will lick their wounds overnight and next day try and put a bridge over the ditch cum band and cross to the other side. He said that's too slow. I will cross the ditch cum band on the same day. I will use mobile warfare with airborne assault also and cross the ditch cum band the same day. Say Ichogil Canal as it's called in Punjab, or the other water obstacles that Pakistan has built in central Punjab or southern Punjab. He said I will cross them the same day, and maybe by the end of the day that exercise will take me to Sakkar Barrage on the Indus River. That was an exercise. But the idea of the exercise was to say that the nature of warfare with Pakistan will now change. This will be mobile warfare. For decades after that, that remained the principle. That principle has now changed. Why? Because warfare has changed, because the instruments of war have changed, and also modern warfare is almost a no-contact warfare. This is not the warfare in which you fix bayonets and go and assault the other one's machine gun positions. Some of that might also happen someday. Some of that's happening still between the Ukrainians and the Russians. But most of the warfare now is non-contact. The 88-hour battle between India and Pakistan, or 87-hour, in fact, I count it as 87-hour. So if I said 88 earlier, I stand corrected. 87-hour, that taught us that much of the warfare between Pakistan and India also now be non-contact and beyond visual range. And that is what India has to prepare for. The first result of that is that the inhibition over the use of long-range vectors has now gone. What did the Pakistanis use? Pakistanis used the only success that the Pakistanis claim in that skirmish, 87-hour skirmish, was the fact that they were able to hit some Indian jets on the first night. Not as many as they claim. I will not tell you what I know, but definitely not as many as they claim. But I will go by what Chief of Defence Staff said, that some aircraft were lost and some tactical errors were made. I will also come to what those tactical errors could be, because those are also among the lessons of Op Sindoor. Inhibition of long-range vectors. Pakistan used this really long-range air-to-air missiles going up to 240 kilometers, right? They did. India used on the first night also weapons, scalp missiles, rampage missiles, which hit Muridke and Bahawalpur from a great distance, say from within 100 kilometers on the Indian side, and Bahawalpur is another about 120, 130 kilometers on the Pakistani side, so long range vector. Even what the army used in its strikes, army hit 7 targets. There the army used long range loitering munitions. Those are the videos that the army released. Or it used the M777 howitzers. These are the guns that India bought from the US not long ago with a specialized munition, that is Excalibur. Excalibur shell can be fired at great distance, way beyond visual range of course, but way beyond the range of conventional artillery. It's also a guided shell which can have the target written on it or mapped on it. Those shells also were used very accurately. So the shyness about using long range weapons was gone. I will also add that even post Pulwama, the Mirage raid over Balakot in Pakistan, that used also standoff weapons. Yet to use those standoff weapons, Indian Air Force had to go a fair bit of distance inside Pakistan. Now that might have been also a part of the messaging that we can come in deep into your airspace, and that too not just in Pak-occupied Kashmir but in Pakistani mainland. At the same time, the aircraft were put to risk by going that deep inside Pakistan. This time, instruments were available, weapons were available, whereby nobody had to go inside Pakistan, but you could hit almost anything inside Pakistan. Even subsequently, see what the Pakistanis used. Pakistanis used their Fateh 1 and probably Fateh 2 missiles, which are again long range, way beyond visual range, long range vectors, the very definition of long range vectors. One of them was intercepted, and that's a spectacular video that we've seen. It was intercepted over Sirsa. Sirsa has a big air base. It was intercepted over Sirsa by an MR-SAM, presumably a Barak 8. MR-SAM is a medium-range surface-to-air missile. We saw, for example, that breathtaking video. It was quite something of a Pakistani missile, presumably a Fateh 2 being taken down. It was quite an interception by what was an Indian MR-SAM, medium-range surface-to-air missile, presumably a Barak 8. That happened. So Pakistanis were using long-range weapons as we were using. Also the Pakistanis, in the most audacious strike that they made, I would say was using 2 or 3 JF-17s on the morning of the 10th, when they came within say 100 kilometers of Indian airspace and launched those CM400 AKG missiles targeting the S400 battery or S400 radar near Udhampur. Now the Pakistanis claim they are celebrating that they hit it. They most certainly did not hit it, because S400 is a very mobile system. It shoots and then it moves. But the fact is that the Pakistanis fired this near hypersonic and near ballistic missile from their aircraft from within about 100 kilometers of Indian airspace, and this was a radar-seeking missile. So once again, the reason I'm calling it audacious is that they got that close and they planned it quite well, and they chose a really premium target. They didn't hit it, they missed it. All credit to Indian Air Force, which had both the presence of mind and the nerve to act in that situation. But the Pakistanis tried to use a very long-range weapon. And then when Indian Air Force went up in the early hours of the 10th, and that operation continued till early afternoon on the 10th, that was the big payback to the Pakistanis, and at least 13 major air bases were hit to cause sufficiently significant damage to show up on commercial satellite pictures. So the whole world can see the evidence of what the Indian Air Force hit. There, the weapon of choice was the BrahMos missile, which then could go up to 400 kilometers when air launched, which means almost through the breadth of Pakistan, and also Scalp, Rampage, etc., which are all long-range missiles. The sum of what I'm saying is that the shyness or hesitation to use long-range weapons or long-range vectors is now gone. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One, political decision has been taken to hit Pakistan in depth, and they also decided they will at least try to hit India in depth. That is taken. The second thing is that now long range weapons have accuracy, and both sides have sufficient trust in their accuracy to believe that they can launch these at specific targets without having to worry about these losing their way and hitting civilian targets or causing collateral damage that will lead to greater escalation. That's why the weapon of choice going ahead again will be a long range vector. Number 3, what did we see on display from the Indian side? We saw the pictures later of Pakistani air bases. We had seen the videos earlier of Bahawalpur, Muridke, and 7 Pakistani terrorist bases in POK and also near Sialkot on the first night. But more importantly, we saw all these hundreds of projectiles coming in from Pakistan. Many of these were armed drones, they were carrying explosives, but quite a few were not. In fact, a majority were not. Many were carrying electronics, many were AI laden. They were trying to figure out gaps in India's air defense. However, all of India, or let's say our people in Jammu and Kashmir, Punjab, Rajasthan, Gujarat, the border with Pakistan, we saw all these projectiles come in. A lot of the fire going back at them from the Indian side, various kinds, but very little hit anything. There was something of very little consequence hit outside or in the vicinity of Adampur Air Base. There was a sick bay hit in an army installation in Srinagar and another minor non-combat installation at Udhampur airstrip. I am not calling it an air base because Udhampur in Jammu and Kashmir is not an air base, it's an airstrip. It's a functional airstrip but not an active combat air base. Otherwise, nothing hit anything. Why? That's because India's multi-layered air defense system, IACCS, Integrated Air Command and Control System, run by the Indian Air Force, and also the Army's Akash Tir. They combined well, and through various layers, they were able to intercept almost all of these projectiles coming in from Pakistan. What is the lesson then? Lesson then is that in modern warfare, defense is the best offense. Because if you've denied Pakistan these 2 nights of action, they tried everything they could. For 2 nights, they threw everything they had. They made zero impact except keeping people up. That itself shows that it was a win for India. So defense is the best offense in modern warfare. It would follow that going ahead, India will also have to plan for much deeper defense. This time, shallow defense was good enough, say 100-150 kilometers from the border and the line of control. Next time, because the range of drones is increasing and Pakistan might use longer range missiles, this defense has to go deeper as well. And that is the threat that Asim Munir has been holding out, that next time India's geography will no longer give them the immunity that they have. So obviously they are looking at longer range drones. We've seen Iran use very long range drones going up to 2,000 kilometers. Ukraine is using drones going 2,000 kilometers or more inside Russia. So the range of smaller drones, range of smaller kamikaze drones is now increasing, and that is something that India will have to think about. That's a lesson. Next point, Stalin said a long time back during Second World War, when he was reminded again and again that the quality of his tanks, the quality of his fighter planes was much inferior to what Hitler had, what the Germans had. Stalin said, in warfare, quantity is its own quality, which means they may have better planes, but if they have 10, I will field 100 against them because I have a large industrial base. I can produce at scale. The same for tanks and the same for human beings, same for soldiers. And ultimately, we know the Russians defeated Hitler. Country like India, with a very large industrial base, has to build in much larger quantity, because this is something which has also become evident in the West Asian war. Whenever Iran has been able to fire drones, large number of Shahed drones, in a critical mass of numbers, or missiles, ballistic missiles with a critical mass of numbers, if you fire enough, then they will overwhelm any defenses. The reason so many American bases got hit, they were not hit by ballistic missiles, American bases in the Gulf. They were hit by drones. They were hit by drones because your defenses can take down maybe 498 drones if 500 are fired. But if to get through, they will cause enough damage to produce pictures that will make the other side claim that they inflicted serious damage on you, and it can be serious damage. We've seen that the Americans have suffered serious damage with a big radar, with a big prestigious AVAC aircraft of which they don't have a replacement. They've suffered damage. They've suffered damage also to their tankers, refuelers on the ground. Once again, if one side fires enough, something will get through. You have to remember that. And the problem that the Israelis and the Americans had in the West Asian War was that they were running out of interceptors. So once again, you need to stockpile. You need to stockpile both the weapons of offense but also weapons of defense. Once again, you have quality, but quantity is also very important. The quality of interceptors that the Americans and the Israelis had was brilliant. It was the best in the world. Nobody comes anywhere close to it. But at some point, they were running short of them. The lesson, it's not a game of cricket or hockey or football that you have better players, great quality, and you will win. Those games are over in a finite time or in a finite number of overs. For warfare, you cannot say that. So you have to have quality, but also the quantity, so that what you have in good quality can go on for as long as you need it or for as long as the other side can endure it. Now we come to the softer side, or what looks like softer side or non-kinetic side. That is the big mantra of modern warfare, C4 ISR. C4, we repeat all the time, and I'm sure many of you are nerds and you know it. C4 is command, control, communication and computers. And ISR is intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance. C4 ISR is at the heart of modern warfare. The fact is, given Pakistan's lack of depth, even with the resources India has, particularly satellites, although our satellites are limited, we should have done much better last few years. We have not really added to our military satellites the way we should have done. The failure of last two PSLVs has been a big setback. In spite of that, India has sufficient resources to be able to map all of Pakistan at all times, and targets will be predetermined. At the same time, we have to be conscious of the fact that Pakistan has some satellites, but more importantly, Pakistan has total access to Chinese satellites, and Chinese have low Earth orbit satellites in hundreds, literally hundreds, and then also geostationary satellites also in a very large number. All of that's available to Pakistan, and that was available to Pakistan the last time as well. That's why the Pakistanis were able to tell our DGMO in their communication with him that, look, you have such and such vector locked and loaded about to attack us. Can you please, we request you to please hold it back. That happened because the Chinese satellites were able to pick up Indian movements in real time. So the lesson is, you have to learn, number one, to improve your own C4 ISR, and number two, to accept the fact that almost nothing that you move will be hidden from the Pakistanis going ahead. And the lessons will also be taken from the fact that some of the larger or capital assets like refuelers and AVACs that the American and radars that the Americans were not able to protect so far away from Iran despite their own defenses. So the need to disperse these and to hide these or to put these into large enough hardened shelters has now become much stronger than before. The CDS spoke about the tactical mistakes India made the first night, which led to the loss of some aircraft. He was candid enough to say it. That is the Indian method. India shows candor and accepts losses as well. And then he said those were rectified. What were those errors? These were not errors. These are not dogfights anymore, that you did not turn or you had more weight on your aircraft. No. One of the errors was not exactly an error, that was a political decision. The political call was to at least pretend that Indian armed forces were not fighting Pakistani armed forces. This was just an action against terrorist organizations, and as far as India was concerned, this was over. They meant no enmity with Pakistani armed forces. That pretense cost Indian Air Force something, because their aircraft were still in the air and the Pakistanis were prepared, and Indian Air Force was not really in air-to-air combat. They had gone to carry out attacks on the ground from a distance. That is one part that created problems. You can call it tactical error or you can call it political limitation. Tactically, Indian aircraft could probably be deeper inside Indian airspace. That done, I'm sure those lessons have been learned. In fact, those lessons were already learned because on the 10th morning when Indian Air Force went up, nothing, forget being shot, nothing even got fired at. The fact is the Pakistanis by this time were grounded, their radars were switched off because they had been attacked over the previous 2 days and they had been suppressed greatly. And in that suppression of enemy air defense, Indian Air Force used loitering munitions, guided loitering munitions. That was one more thing. So at this point, we know that India should be stocking up on those loitering munitions because those are very effective. They will take down some radars at the other end, but more importantly, they'll make the adversary switch off the other radars because it's only when a radar switches on that this guided munition can pick up that radiation and latch onto it and hit that radar. So once you have the fear of a loitering munition like this or a radar-seeking missile like this, the first thing you do is switch off the radar. So first thing you do is switch off the radar. I'm giving you no information which is not public. India has ordered a large number of the same radar-seeking guided loitering munitions from Israel that proved so effective the last time. And finally, I will use the word that I have said I have banned in our newsroom, narrative. And the reason I've banned it is because it's been misused so much. The fact is, it's one thing to have warfare, but there has to be a conclusion to the warfare. A conclusion to the warfare has to be favorable to you, and not only should it be favorable to you in substance, it should also be favorable to you in terms of the international public opinion, not just your domestic public opinion. The last time in Op Sindoor, Indian communication was directed far too much at domestic audiences and it ignored international audiences, and that led to the loss of much advantage. That should not be allowed this time because your ability or skill in telling your story skillfully and convincingly to global audiences also strengthens your ability to decide when to scale down the conflict or when to de-escalate or when to stop fighting, because you cannot stop fighting if you cannot claim victory. You cannot stop fighting unless you can say, I achieved what I had gone out to achieve. Now I'm happy to go home. You also go home. If you don't fire at me now again, I will not fire at you. To get to that point, you should also be able to tell your story. This time, we reached that convincing point because pictures of Pakistani air bases became available. That evidence was available, and also because the Pakistanis called to ask for the ceasefire. We have to see the next time how will such a situation be arrived at, because in any warfare, nobody fights a war to the finish. That is a fantasy. That was Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's 1,000-year fantasy. We'll fight for 1,000 years. Doesn't happen like that. Every war is finite. The key thing is which side is able to, one, control the escalation ladder, that now I go one step up, the other guy catches up, one more step up, the other guy catches up. At this point, I have done enough. I don't have to go any further. See you later. See you later, to ho gayi. See you later, but now I am going home. You go home. For that, you need to be able to tell your story a lot better than we did the last time. And you know what? International think tanks, etc., are already talking about it. I will share with you a piece written by Elizabeth Threlkeld, is a senior fellow and director South Asia at Stimson Center in Washington. She has written a long piece which again paints a picture of the next India-Pakistan conflict, and she says this might follow a much faster escalatory cycle and will be more difficult for Americans and others to intervene and bring about a ceasefire. Also because this time Trump was so indiscreet in the way he claimed credit for this, and the indication or the insinuation is that there is always a possibility that you will slip into a nuclear exchange. Now that has been a big strategic issue between India and Pakistan. For about 40 years, Pakistan has been telling the rest of the world, listen you guys, come help us and India settle on Kashmir, obviously in terms that they want, so that we will not have a war again. Because if we have a war again, the war will be over Kashmir, it will become nuclear, and the rest of the world will have to suffer the consequences. That's the nuclear blackmail that Pakistan has played for a very long time. from 1999 onwards, India had been able to shift this. What was the fear of a nuclear exchange in the subcontinent now had become a complete dislike and disapproval over Pakistan's use of cross-border terrorism. What Pakistanis are now trying to do is they are trying to turn that coin again. And they are saying terrorism is not the issue, prospect of a nuclear war is the issue. That is something that Donald Trump has also talked about again and again. Just as he keeps on increasing the number of planes shot down, he doesn't say whose. I think last time he said 11. So I don't know whose planes is he counting. He similarly keeps increasing the number of lives that he claims to have saved. It was 10 million, then it was 20 million, 30 million, now I think it's 35, 40, I think last time it was 35, 40 or maybe more, right? So the Pakistani blackmail of a nuclear exchange in the subcontinent is back on the table. That also has to be kept in mind as India plans the next escalation cycle, because you can be sure that there will be a provocation at some point of time. I'm not saying tomorrow or day after, but there will be some, and if I'm proven wrong, all of us are happy. At the same time, the best guarantee for peace is to build deterrence.